Welcome to the Harris County Flood Control District's virtual community engagement meeting to discuss the Brookglen Stormwater Detention Basin, Project B512-02-00-E001. This virtual community meeting is being offered by the Flood Control District to share vital information with the community. My name is Robert Fricke with the Flood Control District Communications team. I am joined tonight by a team of Flood Control District leadership and subject matter experts to ensure we continue to keep you up to date on these important flood mitigation projects in your community. We are also joined by staff from area elected officials, offices, and community associations. We are glad to see the community so engaged in these projects. We look forward to continuing to share updates and keeping you all in the community involved. First, we would like to begin tonight's meeting with remarks from Harris County Precinct 2 Commissioner Adrian Garcia.
Thank you and good evening, everybody. I'm Adrian Garcia, Harris County Precinct 2 Commissioner. Thank you to the Flood Control District for hosting this event. And before we begin, I want to send a sincere thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. I know that we are all still working through the impacts of the pandemic, and my hope is that you and your families continue to be safe. If you haven't already, please consider getting vaccinated. If you are hesitant, I completely understand, but I encourage you to speak to your doctor or medical expert to help answer any of your questions or concerns, and hopefully that will lead you to getting your vaccine. My office is hosting ongoing vaccination events throughout our precinct. If you're looking for a place to get vaccinated, be sure to call my office or follow the Harris County Precinct 2 social media pages. My team is updating those on a daily basis. Now let me transition to what brings us here this evening. We're here to talk to you about a flood control project that will help your community. As a part of my new Revive to Thrive initiative, this flood prevention effort will help protect the community and make a major step toward ensuring there are fair and equitable opportunities for communities throughout Precinct 2. Our goal is to focus on revitalization rather than gentrification by empowering communities and creating opportunities for our existing neighborhoods to be more resilient, inclusive, and thriving. With the right investments, resources, infrastructure, commitment, and community involvement, we can all progress and thrive. Harris County works best when all communities are thriving. I'm proud to be from Precinct 2, and I want everyone to know this community is a great place to live, work, and play. This is one of the many flood mitigation projects happening within Precinct 2, aimed at improving our drainage systems to help minimize the impact of major rain events, keeping you, your family, your property, and our communities safe. We know that residents in this community experience flooding during major rain events, including Tropical Storm Allison and, of course, record levels during Hurricane Harvey. This project is intended to help prevent a repeat of those events. Quality infrastructure is not my only responsibility as County Commissioner, but also one of my top priorities. This is why I've tasked my team with taking action and demonstrating real progress to address our community's needs, things that make a difference and make us better prepared to weather the next storm. I hope you will continue to stay engaged in this process. It's important to remember that your voice, your experiences, and your opinions do matter. Again, we're thankful that you've joined us tonight. Please continue to be safe, and if you haven't already gotten your vaccine, please consider doing so. Have a great night.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. We appreciate your comments this evening. This virtual public meeting will begin with a presentation to share project updates, including an overview of the Brookglen Stormwater Detention Basin, its design considerations, the project timeline, and next steps. The presentation will be followed by a virtual question and answer session with Flood Control District team members. Attendees will be able to submit comments and questions through the website or by phone. Any comments not addressed during the Q&A session will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the close of the comment period. Instructions on how to participate in the virtual meeting are included on the slide on this virtual meeting webpage and on the Flood Control District website. I will also share a reminder of these instructions when we reach the Q&A portion of the meeting. We will now transition to Imelda Diaz, Engineering Division Director with the Flood Control District, who will share information about the Flood Control District and this project. Imelda, over to you.
Thank you, Robert, and a special thanks to each of you for joining us tonight. In this presentation, we will give a brief overview of this project. Before we get to the project specifics, we want to share some information about the Flood Control District. The Harris County Flood Control is a special purpose district created by the Texas legislature in 1937 in response to devastating floods that hit the Houston area in 1929 and 1935. The Flood Control District is governed by the Harris County Commissioners Court and works closely with other entities in our region, such as the Harris County Engineering Department and the City of Houston. The organization was created in part to serve as a local partner to leverage federal funding for flood damage reduction projects. Our mission has expanded since then, leading to billions of dollars in federal, state, and locally funded flood damage reduction projects in the ground. The mission of the Harris County Flood Control District is to provide flood damage reduction projects that work with appropriate regard for community and natural values. One of the most difficult challenges we face is constructing effective projects that are sensitive to community and natural values in a highly urbanized area. Harris County includes 23 main watersheds, totaling approximately 1,800 square miles and more than 2,500 linear miles of channel. 2,500 miles is approximately the distance from New York to California. And the watershed is a geographical region of land that drains to a common channel or outlet. Each watershed has its own unique characteristics and its own needs. The project we are presenting tonight is in the Armand Bayou watershed located in Southeast Harris County. Our area is flood prone, and here are some reasons why. We have extreme rainfall, including tropical storms and hurricanes. We have flat, slow draining land, and we have clay soils that do not soak up extra rainfall quickly. While the Flood Control District plays a critical role in the flood risk reduction, we are only one of several entities involved in these efforts in our region. When rain falls on your roof, it flows through several jurisdictions, such as streets and drains managed by the Harris County Precinct and Municipal Utility District, or a city such as the City of LaPorte, before it flows into a larger channel, creek, or bayou that the Flood Control District owns and maintains. This slide illustrates the various jurisdictions, which sometimes we even share with other entities. Inside neighborhoods, as shown on the left side of this illustration, storm sewers and roadside ditches collect stormwater runoff and start the process of moving it away from the streets and the homes. Storm sewers and roadside ditches are the responsibility of the underlying municipality. The larger bayous and channels that take the collected stormwater and move it through our drainage system to Galveston Bay are the responsibility of the Flood Control District. This is shown on the right side of the illustration. In the middle is a stormwater detention basin, sometimes constructed by the Flood Control District. When storm sewers on the left are increased, this creates an increase in discharge. Since it is our policy to avoid any adverse impacts from our projects, detention basins help to safely take in and temporarily store excess stormwater during heavy rain events. Often, we partner with Harris County Precincts, Utility District, and others to add recreational amenities, such as trails to these basins and along our channels. On August 25th, 2018, Harris County voters approved $2.5 billion in bonds for flood risk reduction projects. This vote followed a series of meetings across Harris County in each watershed, which resulted in a list of what is now 181 bond projects. As of August 25th, 2021, every project included in the 2018 bond program has been initiated, including 8 projects in the Armand Bayou watershed. A total of more than $1.35 billion in partnership funding has been secured so far to stretch the 2018 bond program even farther. The actual timing of each individual project will depend on a variety of factors, including environmental permitting, right-of-way acquisition, and utility relocation, and in some cases, requirements of a particular grant. That said, project lists and projected schedules are updated frequently on our website. While the bond was for $2.5 billion, the full cost of every project in the bond table is almost $5 billion. So we made it clear from the outset that we would need funding partners to fully construct the projects in the bond program. As I mentioned, we've had some success so far and have secured more than $1.35 billion in partner funds. This graphic illustrates the many sources of those partnerships, including federal, state, and local funding that the Flood Control District is working to secure for Harris County. Each agency has its own definition of eligible project and its own requirements for local match funding. So the Flood Control District has to work diligently to match projects to the right partnership opportunities. We will now move into the part of the program that is specifically about the Brookglen Stormwater Detention Basin project. The Brookglen Stormwater Detention Basin project is in the Armand Bayou watershed within the city of LaPorte, south of Spencer Highway. The project site is located to the east of Willow Springs Bayou, which the Flood Control District formally identifies as Unit B512-02. The primary objective for the Brookglen Stormwater Detention Basin is to reduce flooding in the Brookglen subdivision as part of a larger drainage plan for the area. The basin is one of multiple projects that will be required to reduce flooding risk in the Brookglen area. These other projects include the Flood Control District's Genoa Red Bluff Stormwater Detention Basin and future channel and bridge modifications that will increase stormwater conveyance out of the Brookglen area. In addition to those projects, we are partnering with the city of LaPorte on a project that will improve the storm sewers for many of the remaining homes in this area. The detention basins we are talking about tonight will mitigate for the increased flow of stormwater from that future city of LaPorte project. As most of you are probably aware, this project began as a voluntary home buyout area. Property was acquired from willing sellers who were assisted in moving to safer areas. Following Hurricane Harvey and with funding from the 2018 bond program, the Flood Control District conducted a study which determined a flood risk reduction project was feasible and that additional property would be needed to build one of the stormwater detention basins. The resulting Brookglen Stormwater Detention Basin project is primarily funded by a Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS, grant, which was awarded in 2019. This is one of those funding partnerships that I referred to earlier. The 2018 bond program provided the additional funding. In 2020, the Flood Control District acquired the additional lots to obtain the property needed to construct the basins. We last presented this project to the public in October of 2020, and I am pleased to share its progress with you tonight. Now let's take a look at stormwater detention basins to understand their role in flood mitigation. Stormwater detention basins provide storage for runoff of floodwaters. This storage is temporary and prevents water from overwhelming our channels. When channel water levels drop back down, the stored stormwater drains back into the channel by gravity via outfall pipes, which are appropriately sized to drain the basin. While all detention basins essentially function the same way, they can be designed in many different configurations. Detention basins can be designed as either wet bottom or dry bottom. Wet bottom basins feature a permanent pool of water at the bottom of the basin. The area from the top of the water to the top of the basin's banks is what we consider available stormwater storage. Dry bottom basins feature a grassy lining and are designed to drain dry between rain events. We are designing a dry bottom basin for this particular project. When we talk about stormwater detention basins, we talk about how much stormwater they can hold in a unit of measurement called the acre foot. That measurement refers to the volume of water 1 foot deep over 1 acre. For context, 1 acre foot equals approximately 325,851 gallons of water. Think of one football field covered with 1 foot of water. With this context in mind, let's look at the design recommendations for the Brookglen Stormwater Detention Basin. The Brookglen Stormwater Detention Basin is composed of 2 compartments, as shown here, the North Compartment and the South Compartment. The North Compartment is located just north of the B512-02 tributary to Willow Springs Bayou and is about 4.4 acres. 18 tracts of land were obtained through the voluntary buyout program to create the North Compartment. The South Compartment is located to the south of the tributary and is approximately 9 acres. For this compartment, 30 tracts of land were obtained through the voluntary buyout program, and an additional 8 tracts were obtained through mandatory acquisition. A 30-inch natural gas pipeline, shown here by a dotted red line, runs through the property. Both compartments will feature pilot channels to help the basins drain dry between rain events. The North Compartment will provide approximately 13.5 acre feet. That's almost 4.3 million gallons of storage. It is designed to drain dry between rain events via an outfall pipe to the B512-02 tributary to the south. The design avoids major utilities and removes service connections to buyout properties. Within this North Compartment, Gladwood Court and a portion of Gladwood Lane will be abandoned following approval by the City of LaPorte. The basin design includes a 15-foot wide, all-weather maintenance access road around the top of bank to allow flood control district equipment to access the basin for maintenance. On this slide, that access road will be located in the lighter green area around the perimeter of the basin. This slide shows you the recommended design and the footprint of the South Basin Compartment, which drains via an outfall culvert to Willow Springs Bayou to the west. This also will be a dry bottom basin. As you can see in this rendering, the South Compartment will be split into west and east subcompartments, interconnected with pipes located under the natural gas pipeline. With the completion of property acquisition in this area, you will see this design includes 2 road removals, pending a street and alley closing application request with the City of LaPorte. The first is a removal of Oak Haven Road, which runs east to west through the site. The second is a removal of a portion of Gladwood Lane, which runs north to south through the site. As part of this process, we have conducted a traffic impact analysis and will submit our application for the road closures to the City of LaPorte. The LaPorte City Council will need to vote to accept or reject our applications. We expect to have this decision in summer 2022. In this design configuration, with both roads removed, the South Basin Compartment will provide approximately 19.7 acre feet of storage. That's nearly 6.5 million gallons of water, or using our football field analogy, almost 20 football fields of water. This design retains access to the nearby Pecan Park and allows for future installation of a walking trail around the basin should a trail sponsor be identified in the future. This design also will include a post-construction landscape plan, which will allow for plantings to provide aesthetic appeal along Ashwin Lane. As part of our grant from the Natural Resource Conservation Service, natural restoration of the area is a key component. So we know that this project will conclude with revegetation and partial reforestation. This will be the case for both the north and the south compartments. If the city of LaPorte denies our application for the removal of Gladwood Lane, the design of the South Basin compartment changes significantly. This slide shows you the design and the footprint of the South Basin compartment should Gladwood Lane be rerouted around the basin. In this configuration, the basin compartment will provide approximately 16.7 acre-feet of stormwater storage, which is approximately 15% less storage to help with the flooding in the area. Instead of a 10-foot access path, access to Pecan Park would be incorporated into the roadways by sidewalks. This next slide shows you a possible design and the footprint of the South Basin compartment should Gladwood Lane need to remain exactly where it is. In this configuration, you can see the footprint of the basin compartment becomes much smaller. At this size, the south compartment will provide approximately 14.8 acre-feet of storage, which would be approximately 25% less storage than the recommended design to help with flooding in this area. In this configuration, the ability of the basin to provide significant flood risk reduction to the area would be greatly reduced. This would also reduce the effectiveness of the city of LaPorte's future storm sewer projects to further provide flood risk reduction in your area. Remember, the city of LaPorte's future storm sewer project needs these detention basins to offset for the increase in discharge that those upgraded storm sewers will provide. With a lower detention volume, that will mean that the city of LaPorte will have to find another location for detention or reduce the scope of its storm sewer project. With Gladwood Lane unchanged in this design, access to Pecan Park would remain the same as it is today. I'd like to share a few words now about trails and recreational amenities. We know the Brookglen community is a very active community of walkers, cyclists, dog walkers, and others who enjoy the area's amenities. We've kept that in mind when designing the South Basin compartment and its connection to Pecan Park, and why we've called out those potential changes for you. It's important to know that the Harris County Flood Control District does not construct trails and amenities at our facilities, but we willingly share our property with entities that do. For that reason, our standards allow us to construct the maintenance berms surrounding a basin from 20 to 40 feet wide, which is wide enough to accommodate future trail installations should a local sponsor decide to step forward to do so. Whenever possible, we are glad for our facilities to support dual purposes, flood risk mitigation and recreation. Again, the National Resources Conservation Service grant we received for this project focuses on restoration. So we plan to include post-construction tree plantings to stabilize the banks, provide shade, improve wildlife habitat, and give this basin a more natural appearance. You can see representation of this restoration along the perimeter of the basin on this slide. As mentioned earlier, this project began with voluntary home buyouts and transitioned to mandatory property acquisition in 2020. The process of demolition can be lengthy and requires coordination among multiple entities to secure appropriate permits. I'm pleased to be able to report today that demolition of the remaining vacant properties in this area has been completed as of late last month. So where are we today? As I mentioned, we last presented this project to the public in October of 2020. At that time, the project was in the preliminary engineering stage of the project life cycle, which is the fact gathering stage of the life cycle. The project is now in the design stage. Once the design is completed and approved, the project will move into construction. The flood control district plan is to finalize design and construct the north compartment first. This is because of various issues, including obtaining necessary utility permits, which could delay construction of the south compartment. So let's take a look at the next steps for that north compartment. We expect to finalize design of the north compartment later this summer. We will also submit our street and alley closing application request to the City of LaPorte. That application will need to be approved by the City of LaPorte before construction can begin. Construction of the north compartment could start in early fall and would take approximately 7 months to complete. So now let's take a look at the next steps for the South Basin compartment. Design for this compartment is expected to be finalized this fall. We will need to obtain letters of no objection from the utility companies in order to submit our street closure application to the City of LaPorte. Again, our application will need the city's approval before we can go to construction. Construction could start in early winter 2022 and also would take approximately 7 months to complete. I will now turn the program back over to Robert to kick off the Q&A.
Thanks, Imelda. Before we move into the Q&A, I want to share a quick reminder that we'd love to hear from you on this project and other projects moving forward across Harris County. To learn more about this project, ask questions, and sign up for our mailing list, please visit hcfcd.org/B512. As a reminder, there are 3 ways to submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. Submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. Submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website at hcfcd.org/B512, or submit a comment via phone at 855-925-2801, utilizing meeting code 3822. If you are joining us via phone tonight, please press star to leave a message. Additionally, I want to reiterate that any questions not addressed during tonight's Q&A will receive a response from the Flood Control District following the close of the comment period. Information from this meeting and a recording of the live stream will be available on the Flood Control District's website and YouTube channel. Joining Imelda for our Q&A session tonight is Jonathan St. Romain, Department Manager of Capital Projects South for the Flood Control District. Now it's time to take some of your questions. Our first question of the evening is for Jonathan. Jonathan, what is a traffic impact analysis, and what were the results of the traffic impact analysis you conducted to determine these roads can be closer?
Sure. Thanks, Robert. And that's a good question. So a traffic impact analysis or traffic impact study is a study that's going to look at any negative impacts to the traffic patterns in an area that could stem from any other kind of project. And so in this case, where you're looking at the potential traffic impacts to the road closures that we talked about, that Imelda explained in the presentation there. And so some of the things that this traffic impact analysis looked into is whether or not any mitigation measures would be needed, such as signalization. In this case, that answer is no. There isn't anything else that would be needed in terms of signalization. And also looked at, are there any changes to some of the existing controls out there, such as stop signs? The impact analysis looked at whether or not there's any changes or negative impacts to the level of service of the area roadways. And by level of service, we just mean how well does traffic flow in that area. And level of service goes from A all the way to F. So A, B, C, D, E, F, with A being the best level of service. And so our traffic engineers study the traffic counts and the patterns and take a look at what's going to happen at that level of service when the roads get closed. The other thing that this traffic impact analysis looked into is are there any major increases in trip times due to the rerouting of the traffic. So not only level of service, but just the increase in trip times if somebody has to be routed a different way. And then the last major thing that the TIA, traffic impact analysis, looked into is safety, and that's really one of the most important, right? And so the traffic engineers looked into and also contacted the local EMS services just to make sure that there would not be any increase in response time from those services, as well as school bus routes. And so the traffic impact analysis did determine that the road closures would not have any adverse impact on traffic times or patterns in the neighborhood. Drive times and increase in traffic, et cetera, all really remain the same as they do today, which is at either a level of service A or B. And then, like I mentioned, in addition to those things, there would be no significant impact to EMS response times. So that was our conclusions from the traffic impact analysis.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. This next question is also from you. We have a live question from Nancy. When does this project start?
So right now we are in the final design stage of the project. And so as we finish up our final construction plans, we're looking to go to bid on the north compartment later on this fall. And so you would see construction out there late this year in that north compartment, and then the south compartment would follow after that. And so there we see the next step for the north compartment, with construction to start in the fall of 2022, and then the south compartment later on in the early winter of 2022.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Our next question is for Imelda. Who is responsible for maintenance of the basin after it is built?
Once the basin is completed, mowing, debris removal, and vegetation management, that's the responsibility of the flood control district. We mow the majority of the channels and the basins 3 times a year during the growing season. But sometimes we do have MUDs or HOAs that choose to enter into an agreement with us in which we pay them for the 3 typical mowings, and the entity takes on the cost for any additional mowing if they want more mowing than the 3 that we provide. If and when a recreational sponsor chooses to build and maintain a recreational amenity for the flood control district property, mowing may also be part of that agreement at that time.
Great. Thank you very much, Imelda. The next question that's come in is for Jonathan. Why is the basin divided into 2 compartments?
Yeah, so that is a good question. Obviously, it looks a little odd when we have this this type of configuration, a project that's separated with 2 compartments like this. But originally, the configuration or the shapes of these basins was determined by the voluntary home buyout area, and so that was determined by the areas that are either received a repetitive loss at the time or are in the highest risk, highest flood risk. And in this particular case, these 2 spots, the north compartment or the areas where the north compartment and south compartment will go, those had essentially, there was sort of a bowl effect there where those homes and streets sat a little bit lower than the rest of the neighborhood, and water had difficulty getting out. And so that's why we saw a higher flood risk for those areas. And that's how the voluntary home buyout area was determined. And so that's why we get this little odd configuration of the basin separated like this.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Our next question for this evening is for Imelda. How is this project being funded, and is it funded all the way through to construction?
So this basin is, as I said in my presentation, is primarily funded by the Natural Resources Conservation Service grant that we received in 2019. That does include the funding for the construction that you will be seeing here within the next year. The 2018 bond program provided the additional funding for the property acquisition and the utility adjustments for the project.
All right. Thank you very much, Imelda. I just want to say, as a reminder, there are 3 ways to submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. You can submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. You can submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website at hcfcd.org/B512, or submit a comment via phone at 855-925-2801, utilizing meeting code 3822. If you are joining us via phone tonight, please press star to leave a message. All right, next question is for Jonathan. What do you mean when you say this basin provides mitigation for LaPorte's storm sewer project and other channel modifications?
I'm sure. So that's a good question. And let's see, to help out with that, can we go to slide 14? That should give us, yeah, there we go, a good overall map. And so, as we mentioned, as Imelda mentioned in the presentation, there's a number of future projects that are going to happen in this area to help reduce flood risk. And this is just one of those. When we look at the Brookglen area, we can see some channels leading down to the south, down to Armand Bayou. And so in addition to this project, we also have some channel improvement projects in this area that are going to help pull more stormwater out of the Brookglen subdivision and increase that conveyance, increase that runoff rate out of the subdivision. But when we do that, when we increase the flow rate through storm sewers or channel widening projects or by whatever means, we need to make sure that we don't send that extra flow, that extra water somewhere else. We don't want to do a flood reduction project in one area and just push that water off onto somebody else. And so that's where detention basins come in. And so this particular detention basin within the Brookglen subdivision will go to mitigate for future Brookglen subdivision drainage improvements. Underground storm sewers will be increased. And so this detention basin will mitigate for that. And I asked to bring up this slide because it helps show this on a more regional scale. You see that Red Bluff Stormwater Detention Basin, that's another one that we're working on. And that one's going to mitigate for other future channel widening and channel conveyance projects in the area.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. This next question is also for you. What was the reason for not buying out the 17 homes on Ashwin Court and the 3300 block of Gladwood Lane, the lots between the north and south basins?
Yep, and so that sort of goes back again to the topic of the original voluntary home buyout area. And so that's what was determined at that time, or the footprints of the basins that we have now and the buyout areas were determined at that time. And so that's why we have what we have now.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. And this next question is also for you. Why were the 5 lots bought out on 8, 7, 11, 14, and 19 Ashwin Lane and 3315 and 3318 Gladwood Lane outside of the proposed north and south basins? How do these lots play into this plan?
I'd have to take a look at exactly which ones we're talking about there, because all of our buyout lots at this time are planned to be within the basin footprints, with the exception of Imelda mentioned or one question as to whether or not we'll be able to close Gladwin Lane. So I'd have to take a look at exactly which those what those addresses you're referring to, and I can get back to you specifically on those.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. And this next question is also for you. When is the decision going to be made about the closure and removal of the streets?
Was that one for me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yes. Next question is for you.
Okay.
When is the decision going to be made about the closure and removal of the streets?
Yeah, so shortly we're working on that. There's a formal process that we have to go through after we do buy out all the homes. Of course, there's all these utilities that used to serve the homes, and so those utilities are operated by folks like CenterPoint or Comcast or AT&T and so in order to fully get those utilities abandoned and then removed, we have to submit applications to those utility companies. They need to ensure that, of course, there are no more residents being served. Then they'll come out and remove those and then send us a letter of no objection. And so once we're able to work through that whole process and get our letters of no objections from the utilities companies, then we will be able to formally submit our application into the city of LaPorte. And so we're looking to have all of this accomplished fairly quickly this summer.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. And I do want to go in and say that there are 3 ways to submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. I'm just reiterating this. You can submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. You can submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website at hcfcd.org/B512. Or you can also submit a comment via phone at 855-925-2801, utilizing meeting code 3822. And remember, if you are joining us via phone tonight, just press star to leave a message. Resuming the Q&A, our next question is for Jonathan. How long will construction take?
We're looking at about 7 months for each of the north and south compartments. So these are fairly small. Sometimes when we have flood control district projects, we talk about 12 months or even 18 or 24 months projects. And so in this case, we estimate about 7 months of construction for each compartment.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Our next question is for Imelda. Will this project create flooding somewhere else?
Before I answer that question, I kind of wanted to touch on the last few questions that people were asking regarding properties that were outside of the footprints. And I just want to remind people that this area was a voluntary buyout program. So we did buy a lot of properties before we decided to construct the basin. When we started analyzing the different scenarios, it just turned out that including those areas that we're talking about here didn't do much for the analysis. So we just limited the footprint to the area that we have now. So for the question that you have now, we are not going to flood anybody else. This project does not result in flooding downstream. As a reminder, the Flood Control District is a no adverse impact agency. Our engineers must ensure that improvements made on one part of the channel are not going to increase flooding risk on another part of the channel, similar to what Jonathan was just telling you a little bit earlier. Additionally, all new developments, I just want to remind everyone, within Harris County have to comply with strict requirements for detention. So we have development criteria that has been in place for over 30 years, and it is always a requirement for any development in the county to have detention.
All right, thank you, Imelda. Our next question is for Jonathan. What's going to happen to the demolished property from now until the basins are built?
Yeah, so the Flood Control District does have the responsibility of maintaining that area that's going to be inside the footprint of the future detention basin, as well as any homes or properties that we buy out. And so we are going to mow and maintain the area in accordance with our county mowing schedule until the property does become part of the basin or until the area will go under construction. And so once the basin is complete, our maintenance group will, of course, take over regular maintenance of that as a detention basin facility.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Our next question is for Imelda. What is the difference between a wet bottom and dry bottom basin, and which one is better?
I sort of touched on that during the presentation. So the difference is that a wet bottom basin generally includes a permanent pool of water at the bottom of the basin. The area above the permanent pool and up to the top of the basin banks is what we consider available storage. A dry bottom basin, on the other hand, is designed to drain dry and remain dry in between the rain events, rather than maintaining that permanent pool of water that we talk about. For this project, it's a dry bottom basin. Generally speaking, the wet bottoms do provide a little bit more storage, but it just depends on the project. There's really not one that's better over the other. It just depends on the project.
All right, thank you, Imelda. This next question is also for you. Could this basin become a neighborhood park?
Absolutely. Of course, we would have to have a sponsor. Perhaps the city or the precinct would have to agree to adopt the basins as a park and maintain them. But we are definitely do encourage the community to reach out to their precinct representatives or their city council, wherever. If you're interested in having that, we will be happy to talk to you about that.
All right, thank you, Imelda. Our next question is for Jonathan. What has changed for this project since the last community engagement meeting?
So since we last met with you about this project back in October of 2020, we have now moved into our final design stage. And so at that time, the project was really right in the middle of our preliminary engineering stage of our project lifecycle. And it's in that preliminary engineering stage that we look at some of the different alternatives to really come up with the best configuration for this basin. So remember, on some of the exhibits, we looked at things like, or an example would be the south compartment being separated by that pipeline. Actually, if we could go to, I think it's slide 18, we can take a look just at the configuration there. And so in this case, in this alternative that we are now into the final design stage designing, you see that we're crossing under, in the south compartment, we're crossing under that pipeline that's the red dotted and dashed line. And so I bring this up as an example because in our preliminary engineering stage, we look at the different ways, what's the best way to cross this pipeline? Do we pay to relocate it or have it go deeper to make a bigger basin, or is it better to just cross under it with the pipe? And how do we outfall or connect to the our channels in the area? And so all of those things get worked into that preliminary engineering stage so that we can come up with a plan for what this final design is going to be. And so that's what we presented to you back in October of 2020. And so since then, we have been working on the final design, which is the actual set of construction plans or construction drawings. Those construction drawings are what's going to go out to bid for the contractor to pick up and carry the project through construction. And so since October 2020, we've come up with this final design, and we've gotten about 50% through this final design, and that's what we are sharing with you tonight.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. This next question is for either one of you. Why can't you dig the basin compartments deeper to hold more water instead of moving the street?
So I can take that. Yeah, so the basins in their currently planned or designed configurations are really as deep as they can be in order to drain by gravity. And so in this case, in really most cases around Harris County, we excavate our detention basins as deep as they can go. And that depth is really set by the depth of the receiving channels, in this case, Willow Springs Bayou, or that tributary B512-02. And so because of the water level in those channels, we can't go any deeper than that, because then water would just come in and fill the basin up to that depth that the water exists in those receiving channels. And so we have set that depth as deep as they can possibly go in order to drain by gravity.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Our next question is once again for either one of you. If construction takes place during hurricane season, does that put the neighborhood at higher risk?
The answer is no, it doesn't. And as a reminder, and I think at the end of the presentation, we'll remind you also that flood season in Harris County is year round. And so we do have the risk of flood events in every month. But I'll also say to that, we have protocols in place for all of our construction projects at all times of year that if heavy rain is forecast, that there can be, of course, no obstructions left, and construction sites have to be clean and in a condition to where a heavy rain event is not going to create an issue because of a project being under construction. And so depending on or no matter what time of year it is, we can have a heavy rain event, and our construction projects would not pose any kind of threat or increase in risk.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Our next question is for Imelda, and Sally asks, when we first bought our home 30 years ago, we were in a 100-year floodplain. Will these new detention areas change our floodplain back to the 100-year flood?
Sally, it's difficult to answer that since I'm not sure exactly where you're located. But for this project, the majority of the benefits that we saw were really for the 500-year event, not necessarily for the 100-year event. But we can get back to you if you send us your address.
All right. Thank you, Imelda. Our next question is for Jonathan. Why is this a dry bottom and not a wet bottom basin?
Yeah, so there's a few reasons for that. The dry bottom basin alternative was selected in the PER stage. And then another reason is that in coordination with nearby airports in the Houston airport system, wet bottom basins can pose a threat or a hazard to aircraft by attracting birds and wildlife. And so since we're in the proximity of a couple airports, we felt it best in coordination with our partners at the Houston airport system to keep this as a dry bottom basin. But we do build wet bottom basins in a lot of areas in Harris County and in the Armand Bayou watershed. But we did choose this one to be dry.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Our next question is also for you. You mentioned the other projects needed to reduce flooding in this area. What are those? Are there other projects planned for this watershed?
Sure, and absolutely, and yes. Let's try slide 14 again. So there's our regional look, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. If we hone in on the Brookglen area, you can see in that pinkish purple color the spot where these two stormwater detention basins are, and then the brown color is the Brookglen subdivision. Within that area, the city of LaPorte has its own storm sewer improvement project, and that storm sewer improvement project we mentioned earlier is going to use these flood control district detention basins as mitigation for their increase in runoff. And so that's just for this little local area right here in Brookglen, but also a little more regionally. Well, somewhat a little more regionally, these other projects also specifically do affect the Brookglen neighborhood. We have a list of channel improvements projects and also a couple of bridge reconfigurations in the area. And so those channel improvement projects include channel conveyance improvements on Willow Springs Bayou. That's we would call it channel B512. but also improvements to channel B109, which goes south, and that's east of Genoa Red Bluff Road. There's also a couple of bridge modifications in there, and those bridge modifications are going to help increase the channel conveyance to pull more stormwater out of the Brookglen neighborhood. But again, we've mentioned before, whenever we increase that flow rate, whenever we increase runoff, and we say we want to pull more stormwater out of the Brookglen neighborhood, well, that water has to go somewhere. We can't push it off onto somebody else. And so that's why you see here on the map the Genoa Red Bluff Stormwater Detention Basin here in blue, that's just south of Fairmont Parkway. And so the flood control district has a phase 1 of that detention basin that's under construction now, and there's other phases planned for that in the future. And that's going to be a fairly large stormwater detention basin that will mitigate for the increase in runoff that I talked about from channels B112 and B109 and those bridge modifications. So those channel improvements and bridge modifications are going to pull more water out of Brookglen, out of the Brookglen subdivision, and then the Genoa Red Bluff Stormwater Detention Basin is going to mitigate for that increase in runoff so that we don't push the water off on other folks. And so that's our plan for the next several years. Of course, funding is always a big question when we talk about these, and we are pursuing funding so that we can get these projects going.
Thank you, Jonathan. This next question is for Imelda. Will this project eliminate flooding in this area? If not, why will it? Why won't it?
Well, it's always impossible to say that this project or any project is going to completely end flooding in any area. However, we do know that projects such as this, the stormwater detention basins, can offer effective flood damage reduction by temporarily storing this excess stormwater. Of course, the project will reduce the flooding in the area, but the risk of the flooding will remain. And our message is always that we recommend that everyone in Harris County and our surrounding areas have flood insurance to ensure against the possibility of any kind of personal and financial loss.
All right, thank you, Imelda. Our next question is for Jonathan. Can you go over against how much stormwater this basin will hold?
Sure. So we've got the north compartment and the south compartment, and the total of those two, we're looking at about 33 acre feet of storage, which is more than 10.8 million gallons. Specifically, the north compartment, we're looking at about 13.5 acre feet of storage, and in the south compartment, 19.7 acre feet of storage. And so if we go back to our football field analogy that we looked at in the presentation, that's about 33 football fields or 33.2 football fields of water for the combination of both compartments.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Our next question is also for you. What is the plan for addressing the issues with B512-0200?
Was that one for me? Sorry.
Yes. What is the plan for addressing the issues with?
Sure. So the volume created by our north compartment will keep the floodwaters within the banks of that tributary B512-02. And so that's when we talk about storage volume in these detention basins. I'm glad you asked that question, because that gives us a chance to show that that's the real impact, right? Or the real benefit is the volume of the water is now held in that detention basin. And when we look at the peak, what we call a peak water surface elevation in the channel B512-02, following the construction of the basin, that's the water in the channel is going to be lower. And so in a 100-year event, water will remain in bank in that channel.
All right, Jonathan. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Our final question for this evening is also for you, Jonathan. What about hike and bike trails here?
The flood control district does not build hike and bike trails, but we do partner with folks that do. And so following the conclusion or following the construction of this detention basin, there certainly is potential to coordinate with entities who would construct or facilitate the construction of those hike and bike trails. And then another quick reminder that this project is funded through a NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service grant. And so one of the requirements of that grant is to provide restoration. And so we do have restoration and partial reforestation plans that will take place after construction.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. And with that, I would like to share one final reminder that we are continuing to accept comments and feedback on this project through May 19th, 2022. We also encourage everyone to get flood insurance as flood season in Harris County runs year round. Thank you again for joining us this evening and for your engagement with this project. We look forward to continuing to share updates as our work moves forward. Stay safe and have a good evening.